for coming. We've got visitors from Leeds, we've got visitors from Sheffield, we've got visitors from Plymouth, we've got visitors from Worcestershire and Gloucestershire, and plenty of you from Herefordshire. Thank you so much for caring enough about the crisis in children's social care to come out on a Saturday. Very quickly, fire exits, in case I forget. If there is a fire alarm, you can go out through that door or through the main doors, and the assembly point is right opposite on the far side of the road, the little service road. We're aware that there are many people in this room that are affected directly or indirectly by some of the tricky issues we're going to talk about. There's a room, if you need some time out, there's a room, just go out of the door and turn left. It's labelled lift, but it's actually a comfy room where you can take a breather. If you'd like any support on your way out, Belinda, could you just wave? If you'd like some support, Belinda will happily go with you. The conference has been organised by the Families Alliance for Change. We're a group of parents, carers and stakeholders who really care about what's going on locally and what's going on nationally. We've pulled it together. We're a bunch of volunteers, so bear with us if there are some technical hitches. And what we really want to do is focus on solutions. I went to the book launch for Luke and Anna's book, Parent Blame, which has been the inspiration for this conference. And what really struck me was how many people are up and down the country saying the same thing, experiencing the same awful things that can happen when children's social care goes wrong. And it's high time that we really focused on solutions. So that's the main aim of the morning. We've got tables so that in the working break and in the plenary you can come to the tables and you can jot down your ideas. There's plenty of pens and papers. On the tables we've pre-planted some themes that you might want to think about. So there's 10 different themes and we're looking for solutions on any of those themes. So we've got things like changes in guidance, changing the language we use, robust accountability systems that are independent of LAs, reform of the family courts, rebalancing of social work role from investigating and assessing to support. Lots of ideas on there. The break's at 11:35. We've called it a working break. We hope you're going to be scribbling lots of ideas that you can share later in the plenary. We've built in lots of time to talk, so we're going to have short speeches from the front and hopefully lots of discussion. So a huge welcome to Luke and Anna, whose book has been the inspiration.
Can I ask a quick question?
Of course.
Okay, can we record or take photographs?
We are recording, so that job is done for you. I wouldn't say blanket yes, because I haven't asked permission for... We're recording only the people at the front who have agreed to be recorded, so probably that's a no, Brian, sorry. Okay, yeah. Okay, so huge welcome to our authors, our first of our authors, Luke and Anna. Thank you very much.
Hi, good morning everybody, and thank you for being here. I just want to talk briefly about how this book that you can see here started and what we are trying to say. And basically, Luke and I work at the University of Leeds in partnership with a charity, Debra. It's a charity for children with brain conditions. And for the past 6 years, we have been doing research, legal research, to understand some of the common problems that are preventing families with disabled children to access to the law. So in 2021, we did a project about parent-carer blame, because Debra had received many reports from families with disabled children who were trying to access to support, having social care needs assessments, and instead of finding supportive assessments, they were finding assessments based on safeguarding and experiencing humiliation. So for us, it's all about trying to understand the problem and to have evidence to be able to fight for solutions. So in this case, we did a big survey, and we also looked at the policies, the protocols for assessment used by local authorities. And we found that most of those protocols, for example, were asking families to show the bedroom or to speak to the children alone. And those are practices that if the local authority doesn't have cogent evidence that a possible situation of negligence, of abuse is happening, that shouldn't be happening, but it's happening. So we published a report in 2021 that was covered by the BBC. And after that, we have been focused our work on the different dimensions of parent-carer blame. So very simply, parent-carer blame for us is when the state, through their policies, their actions, their inactions, are, instead of supporting families, are blaming families. For example, we have the example that I provided of the social care needs assessment. Then we did a big project about fabricated or induced illness, and so on. So for us, for example, fabricated or induced illness, that would be at the very end of a parent-carer blame. So this is the book we published very recently in July 2025. It is an edited book, so the beauty of this book for us who wrote it is that it's about everybody's voices. So obviously we cannot do things alone. We shouldn't be doing things alone, because at the end we are academics and we also work in the practice, but the real experts about the problems that they experience and the change that needs to happen are the families with disabled children. Myself, well, I am, for example, part of one of those families. My only sister has learning disabilities. So I, for example, every month I have to fight for my sister's care package and so on. So this book has the voices of just a few academics, but mostly families, parent carers who have suffered humiliation and justice in the field of education, social care, and so on. And also it has the voices of professionals working for NGOs, for example, Lucy Fullard, who set up the Parent Carer Alliance, or for example, Define Fine. You may know this is an organization focused on education, on special needs. And the book also obviously has a lot of legal analysis, because building to what I said at the very beginning, we want and we need to have the evidence to show that there is a problem, that the problem is happening everywhere, and also to think about possible practical solutions. And about the practical solutions, we do suggest solutions, for example, change in policies, because we found that in many cases, the root of the problem seems to be a wrongful policy. However, the book also suggests simple things that are in everybody's power. For example, if somebody can show empathy. For doing that, we believe that it is not needed to have a policy change. We believe that changes need to happen, but we also believe that human rights are not so much in the big places, are rather in the smaller places. Each of us every day are exercising human rights in a way or other. And for example, these officers working with families can do many things that they can do those things just now, in terms of how I am going to listen to the family. I am going to be empathetic. I am going to, even if I can help, at least I am going to provide a reply to this family, so the family again feels listened to. So for us, these are things, basic human compassion, that you don't need a big change to happen. So I would like to just to close this short address with just planting this seed amongst all of us for discussion today. Like all of us, between our different roles, what can we do for change? Some of us will, for example, decide to do different things, and there are small things which in the end are not so small, that all of us can do, we believe that. So the book is all about establishing parent-carer blame with the voices of all involved. The families, once again, are the leading experts, and we believe that there are things that can be done for change. Some may seem bigger than others, all needed for change, and I hope that today's day is an opportunity to talk about changes, because at the end, we believe in human rights that are touching people's lives. And if we are talking about rights or policies, but those are just ideas that are not going to leave these walls and are not going to touch people's lives, we don't believe that there is much need in doing that. Just to say, we are not intending to sell the book to you, but just to mention that we will be handing over some leaflets. And for example, the price of the soft cover book is £25, and with this leaflet, you can get the book for 50 with a 50% discount if you are interested. But thank you so much for being here and for listening to us. And I hope this will be a great day. Thank you. Thanks.
Yes, we've got a film. There was Channel 5. Was that Fabricated? Yeah. Which was after a piece of research we did on fabricated-induced illness. So let's see that. That'd be great. It's quite a short clip, I think.
I've been hearing the stories of 3 different mothers with one common trauma.
They said that I had exaggerated his medical needs and that I had taught him to exaggerate his own medical needs and his own pain.
This doctor came to us and said that she didn't believe the symptoms and that they wanted to take away the medication, and that because I had her on the medication, I was essentially killing her.
They explained that it was concerns of FII, and I just said to them, but the paediatrician's involved, I'm just following what they're saying.
FII is fabricated or induced illness. It's a rare form of child abuse, and these 3 mums have all been suspected by a doctor, a school or a social worker of exaggerating or inventing their child's symptoms. Any concerns of FII must be followed up with a child protection investigation. And while experts agree FII is highly unusual, a new study shared exclusively with 5 News indicates 75% of local authorities in England have investigated cases in the last 3 years. Researchers questioned almost 400 parents about their experiences. All said they've done nothing wrong. All described the devastating trauma of suspicion, even though most children, 95%, were not taken into care and are still living at home. But 5% were, like Tracy's son.
I was completely broken and devastated. I was crying all the time. I was contemplating suicide.
Tracy's disabled son, who's asked us not to show his face, was taken into care at 16 after allegations of FII that she and he have always denied. He was sent to live in shared accommodation, the only child in a building also housing drug users. He slept with a knife under his pillow in fear. Banned from contacting his mum for 2 years, as soon as he turned 18, he returned to live with Tracy.
And by the time we got him home, he was riddled with fleas. He looked like he'd been in a concentration camp.
The report found parents of disabled children, or those with rare or complex illnesses, are more likely to be accused of FII.
What trauma a child must go through because he's cried and screamed about his medical condition. Can anyone understand what that mentally must do to a child? To know that he has to hide his own medical condition for fear that he would lose his family again.
The research also suggests disabled or neurodivergent parents are 4 times more likely to experience allegations. This mother is autistic, and so is her son. When she reached out for help, social workers began an FII investigation. They believed she was giving him medication he didn't need for seizures, that she was stopping him going to school. He was put in a children's home at 11. After 4 years of fighting, he was allowed to return home. And they've both been scarred by the experience.
I feel so betrayed by people that you expect to help. And, you know, my family, like I'm sure many others, we think, oh, the social workers will help you, or, you know, even when we went to family court, you would think, oh, the evidence will come out that this is, you know, a family that needs support. That hasn't happened. But really, when it comes to special needs, the system is geared to deny those needs and accuse mothers specifically of FII, rather than actually just listening and giving that support.
Ideally,
the British Association of Social Workers have seen a rise in referrals. They're calling for change.
from my experience, far too many families are being accused of FII where they're not exaggerating or making up their child's difficulties. And there will be a few that do that. However, this broad approach is causing the parents, caregivers, immense distress. It's causing children immense distress.
We've got literally pictures everywhere.
And this mum says the anguish is unbearable. Melody had complex medical needs, and during the last months of her life, Karina was investigated for FII by doctors who believed she was giving her pain medication she didn't need, and a judge ruled should be taken away.
They wouldn't even let me be alone with her in a room. Because of this doctor was saying, she put in the medical notes, don't ponder to the family, don't listen to the family. So every time we raised concern, look, she's bleeding, she'd put in there not to listen to us, that we was making it up.
The hospital told us at the inquest into her death, the coroner concluded Melody's care had been appropriate. But Karina says the allegation made those final months a nightmare, and the trauma goes on.
I've been diagnosed with PTSD. I've had to go on antidepressants. I've had to have CBT treatment and EMDR therapy. I've had to be with a mental health team. I had a nervous breakdown. And now I'm petrified of hospitals. I'm petrified if my children hurt themselves.
Like all parents investigated for FII, the allegations will remain on these mums' medical records for life. They know children must be protected, but say they've been caught up in a system that creates more harm than it prevents.
Good. We're going to break in a minute and have a panel session. We're on time. Just wanted to say a few words. I'm Luke Clements. I'm a Hereford resident, but I work with Anna. I think the objective today is how do we resolve these issues? Fabricated induced illness, which we've done a lot of work on, parent blame. It talks about data protection and not being able to change your files. We're doing a lot of work on that really appalling thing that every time a parent goes to see a GP, something flashes up saying this person is known to safeguarding when it's not true. We are really focused on both the little things and this issue of empathy and just simple kindness with frontline workers. But many of them are operating to very strict protocols, policies, and they have to report to senior officers to say they've, interviewed a child alone and they've inspected the bedroom when it's totally inappropriate. So we are, I don't want to say that we're not discussing these things at a high level. We are meeting ministers. We have a launch in Westminster of a new report next month, a very high level piece of work, which will be covered by the BBC and Channel 4. We're coordinating a litigation strategy and we're talking to civil servants, but so often nothing happens. We can talk to the Royal College and explain why their guidance is wrong, and they give excuses, but it's very difficult to make change. So it's very interesting to have this opportunity today for everybody to think about how you do that. We think the media is important. We think litigation can sometimes work. Discussions with civil servants can sort of work, not really. Politicians either give you excuses or don't turn up, and I think in relation to our MPs, today speaks for itself. So we're looking for those solutions. We're not particularly looking to blame, I mean, our most recent research, which is on what we call system-generated trauma, we do not look to blame frontline workers, except when there's a lack of empathy, a lack of kindness. There's no law against being kind. But the further up the tree you go, this idea that these are blameless people is much more hard to believe, but it's much more hard to get change at those levels. So everything that we can get out of today would be great. And our core issue, I think, that comes out time and time again, comes out in every piece of research, is just not listening to families. That somehow the fact that you've been to medical school makes you an expert in that particular child. And we've had that said by paediatricians. I'm the expert in that child. Well, the expert in the child is the parent. And we just cannot get that across at the highest or the medium levels of these sort of empires. So we're going to break now because Ollie's SIM card is going to explode, and we're going to have an hour, not an hour, a minute, and we're going to have a panel discussion, which hopefully will involve listening. So thanks.
Mary Kidson. Mary Kidson is the author of the book Legally Abducted. I'm just going to do, Mary's story is sadly a long and arduous one. I'm just going to give you a quick overview. When Mary's daughter Vicky was a young teenager, when Vicky was a young teenager, she became chronically unwell. Mary sought help from the NHS, but local services refused to help Vicky, claiming there was nothing wrong. Mary did what any mother would do, researched the problem herself, and in 2012 found Dr. Hertoga, who practiced in Belgium. He prescribed hormone treatments which transformed Vicky's health. Then, on the 5th of March 2013, the police arrived and arrested Mary on suspicion of child cruelty. Vicky was removed by the police and put into care. Mary was taken through the family courts where the allegation was FII. When she was found not to meet the condition for FII, she was charged with 3 counts of poisoning. Her bail conditions stipulated that she was to have no contact with her daughter. Vicky, who is autistic, was extremely distressed by the separation from her mother and reached out to Mary for support. Mary responded to her child, and in doing so, she breached her bail conditions. She was remanded into prison and stayed there for 6 months awaiting trial. During this time, she was only allowed phone contact with her daughter, who was now sectioned and in a secure psychiatric unit. The trial lasted nearly 3 weeks. The judge ruled that there was no case to answer and Mary was freed. But Vicky and Mary were not reunited for another 8 months. The ramifications for both Mary and Vicky of the false accusations have been huge. If you want to know more, please buy the book. There's some for sale over there. So that's Mary. And our second panellist on our advertised agenda was Tracy Norton. Oh, Tracy Norton. Tracy, please go on. Try that again. Tracy Norton. Tracy Norton, there we go. Tracy Norton was the first woman that you saw in the Channel 5 video, the woman with the disabled son. Sadly, her son is unwell and hospitalised, so she hasn't been able to come up from London, which is not good news. But she sent us a little video, a little message for you. So we're just going to play that, and then you've got your panel, and off you go. Oh, the light, sorry. Because I was doing the light. Yeah, sorry. Let's do the light.
Hello, my name is Tracy and I am part of Support Not Separation and the Disabled Mothers' Rights Campaign, and I welcome anyone to contact me if you would like to know more about what we do. I'm bitterly disappointed not to be here in person, but the consequences of FII have struck its ugly head this week and my son is in hospital. As a consequence of covering up a serious hospital overdose that put him in ICU, I, like many others, was accused of FII. Not once, but twice. I was arrested and 12 years of medical records vanished. The consequences of this have been life-changing. But if you put everything that happened to me to one side, what I will say to you all is that in the name of stopping a mother complaining, or in my case exposing serious medical malpractice, professionals go to the lengths of parental blame, without care to the trauma they create, not just for myself as his mother, but far worse is the trauma my son lives with, and I watch with tears. My once happy, smiley, outgoing child is now a young adult that never smiles and never leaves his room. He jumps and hides if there's a knock at the door for fear it's a social worker, and due to a genetic condition needs ongoing care and serious surgery. But he will not look or talk to them. They have taken away his whole life and future, and they walk away. They did not care what they left behind. So I stand with you all today with these amazing people who have written tirelessly to expose this junk science, and I look forward to working with you all on a national campaign to have FII removed from use in the name of all mothers and children that have been traumatized. Have a great day.
Wish Tracy and her son well, and this is Mel, Tracy's colleague, so if anybody wants to speak to Mel about the organisation Support Not Separation, she's here. Let me turn the lights on again. And I'd just like to thank Mel for stepping in Tracy's place. Mel lives in Herefordshire and also has a tale to tell.
Hi everybody, I'm Melissa Portman-Lewis. I'm going to share two experiences. I have a close friend who's not here today because she suffers from the trauma that she was put through with FII. Her situation was very different from mine. It was a school nurse that actually registered her as FII, and because of that, everything that everybody shared, the fact that you have major trust issues with the people that should help you, have caused immense suffering to her and her family. And again, the same situation with Tracy Norton. Her child, who's an adult now, has really complex medical conditions and autism. So because he is unable to engage when he's with the medical profession, they actually falsely accuse mum continually of speaking for him and putting words into his mouth and actually making up his diagnosis. And it can't be underestimated. It is on her medical records and she is continually fraught to get help for her own medical conditions, which have most definitely been brought on by a lot of these false allegations. My situation personally is very different. The person is now an adult, had very early intervention from the age of nursery. We had additional support, and because of the extremely challenging behaviour, found myself in the social services situation through asking for help, because my child actually needs a team of people. Again, we're going back to really complex disabilities where people didn't understand, and actually I was having numerous meetings but not getting anywhere. So what happened with me, I was quite surprised when I was in a centre tribunal to be accused of having Munchausen's by proxy. And I had to say to the barrister, what is Munchausen by proxy? I don't understand what's going on. I was in a situation where, because I did have legal representation, it wasn't able to go on my record because there was no fact-based evidence for these allegations. So at the meetings I was continually going with or for, there were things like, you're a refrigerator mum. And then I would have to try and understand what a refrigerator mum is, because I have a very challenging behaviour young person, and if anybody knows anything about autism, if you have sensory processing difficulties, you cannot be touched. So it wasn't the fact that when I'd go to meetings and see my child, I didn't want to give them a hug and a kiss. I didn't fancy flying halfway across the room, hence why I didn't do it. But I didn't realise notes were being put on me that I wasn't behaving in the way that society expects me to. My child would have Christmas under the Christmas table with a bowl of sausages. We didn't care, because Christmas for my child is what's for my child and not for society. But unfortunately, when you go to all these meetings, unbeknownst to you, and my allegations came from social services, you are actually being monitored and notes are being written on you. So FFI, refrigerator mum, accused of these. I was privileged to find out about Luke Clements' research to find out that actually in Herefordshire you would only actually have, I believe, if I listened correctly, one case of FFI in 2 years. I have friends and colleagues and people I've met, and there's at least 5 or 6 that I know of, actually probably more than that. So statistically we are pitching quite high in Herefordshire. And we want solutions. I've always asked for solutions at meetings, because I understand that a lot of this doesn't necessarily come from a malicious place, but a real lack of understanding. And when you've got really complex disabled people in your life with numerous tapestry diagnoses, it is very difficult to answer. Even as a parent, it's difficult. So again, what Anna's saying about the compassion, the understanding, the empathy, that's what we needed. I was lucky, I discovered Sunshine Support and Chris Wadlow, who also, like myself, has had many legal processes. I've had 5 to date for my person. Chris Wadlow went all the way up to High Court for her person. And we are privileged to have Rachel Parry here, who's head of the social side of Sunshine Support, if anybody wants to have a chat later, because actually advocating for yourself when you've got post-traumatic stress disorder is difficult. So solutions, please. Thank you.
Yeah. It's not my panel, is it? Good God. It would be great to have some comments and feedback, some suggestions. I know that's always a dangerous thing, but that's what today's all about. So, hi, sorry. Just remind us again. Yeah.
So I'm Mel from Support Not Separation on behalf of Tracy Norton. One thing that I would say that I think professionals and parents alike aren't really aware of, and it's something that you've just mentioned, is that your time with social services and safeguarding services, you are actually under caution. And I think we need to have, we need to change the way we think about approaching professional meetings, because from the second they see you, you are under caution and they are recording everything. That's their job, that's what they're paid to do. However, I don't think parents and professionals really understand that that's its system, if you like. So if you approach every single meeting with every safeguarding professional as if you're under caution in the way you would if you would police, you are going to have a different approach, I feel, to how you behave. Thank you.
I've got a question up there. Can I just come back on that? So our research is showing that very strongly, and it's devastating that once somebody's got this inclination to blame you, everybody, many families are sent on parenting classes because they're blamed rather than, the fact that the child has special needs is not acknowledged. And in parenting classes, they're often asked to be honest about their feelings. And they are honest about their feelings, and that's all written down. And then it's used at a later date. And that's true with consultants, it's true with teachers. And isn't that devastating undermining of trust that we have with these professionals? And, trauma and trust go together. The word trust in our most recent research comes out all the time, but these things completely erode trust with the people that we have to rely on. Sorry.
Hi there, I'm Jim. I've got a daughter with special education needs. I've also been a county councillor for 14 years in Herefordshire. I never knew about this, and why should I, sort of thing, that's one of those things. Now I'm aware of it, even one case is bad. And if we've got a disproportionate case in Herefordshire, is there a common denominator? Now, as a councillor, I'm asking the question, this is led by health. You need to have a paediatrician to start this ball rolling. Once the ball's rolling, it rolls into the county council and the social services. Now, there's historic issues with Herefordshire Council. I do believe it's improving vastly. But once they've got your teeth into you with one thing, they don't let it go. I once had an example of I went along and sat with this particular person, and they were accused of being mental health issues because they didn't like speaking, because they were concerned about being in a room speaking to people. Once they start that, and there was a lot of different social workers got involved. They started from that base that they've got mental health issues, and it wasn't the case. So it may well be that how Herefordshire Council can improve it, and they are improving it by having more consistency with social workers and getting more permanent social workers in place. But I don't think it doesn't start with the council, it starts with health, and they've got to make sure they get this absolutely right. And there is a policy where a paediatrician has to see them. Perhaps it needs to be 2 paediatricians, and they need to agree. Because, as I say, once they've written something down, it sticks. Throw mud and it sticks.
Is this working? No. Can everybody hear me?
Just on the bottom, click at the bottom, move it the other way.
Yeah.
So, I think you should have a look.
Oh, that's better. Yes. Yes. I would like to just add to that, Jim, that actually, yes, it is often health-led, but to be quite honest, they falsify records. And one of the things in my case was that they actually almost completely rewrote my daughter's records in health at the hospital. And they ignored everything, because we moved to Herefordshire from Worcestershire, where my daughter was originally diagnosed and where she was placed in a preschool language unit, for example, and lots of issues in Worcestershire. And in Worcestershire, we had amazing support. We moved to Herefordshire and all that support disappeared. And what health did and what social care did with us is that they hid, if you like, my daughter's early records. As it happened, I had those early records myself elsewhere with another solicitor. And luckily I contacted them and I managed to get them before they were about to be destroyed. So I got those records into court. And I think that was a great help in the psychologist seeing what was going on. Certainly, not the judges in the family court, but even in the criminal court, the judge basically saw through it straight away. So parents it's almost impossible for parents to deal with this. And I've always said since my case is to make sure you have copies of your child's records elsewhere, not at home, but elsewhere, that you can access should anything like this happen, because it does happen too regularly.
I'll just say that I was actually really well supported by CAMHS, and mine didn't come from medical. Mine came from a false narrative from social services. There was actually no evidence along the way at all, ever, to back up mine. So where I do know it can come from health. Not always. It can come from education and also social services.
Yeah.
Yes, just to add, our own research in 2023 showed that most of the allegations, and we did a survey and we had a sample of more than 800 replies, and most of the allegations came from the NHS, second from schools, and in third place from social care.
Hi, I'm Beverley. I'm going to speak in a minute, but I have children who've been in hospitals and things, and I was just thinking of what you were saying, Mel, was it? About the caution when you go to hospital, like you think you're going for help, and when you finally see a lot of your child's records, a lot of this has been written down like from day one, not critical, but I just mean any parent who goes into hospital will realise that every letter is wrong, really, and you feel like, well, it's not that big a deal, I won't complain and follow this up, and then you no idea that decades later it could become evidence in something. But I think just that you don't want to approach everyone with caution, you want to approach people with trust, but all of those records need to be accurate from the beginning, and I don't know what the answer to that is, but I just wanted to say, like, so many of my child's records are wrong and did get used in court at some point.
Yeah, there's in our book, there's 2 chapters on data, just 2, I think, and the story that Mary's told and Melissa's told and you have told is time and time again, these records are wrong, and it's virtually impossible to get them corrected. And we are sort of trying to get some litigation going on that with the Information Commission Office, because again, the guidance is wrong. Is there just time for one more? We're running, is there time?
Hi, my name is Pam, and good or bad, I'm a retired social worker, so I've been at the professional side, but I also have a son who has particular needs and continues to struggle. One of the things that interests me about the parent and blame, look, I don't know what your background is, but there was never, and as a social worker, there was never enough credence given to genetics, the nature-nurture. Now, my understanding now is the epigenetic, we can evidence a lot more about the genetic link, but it was always about nurture, so the parents were to blame. I could tell them, and I have told them from before my son could walk, that there was something not quite right, and I'm sure a lot of parents can relate to that. And this blame culture persists, and probably I was part of it, sadly. And I wondered if you knew anything about the nature-nurture divide, and if there's any more information out there about that. Because I'm sure most parents could say, yeah, I know my child from an early age, there was something not 100%, not quite functioning, not quite right. You're not believed, it's all parent, it's all pure parenting.
Yeah, you're 100% correct, because even in pregnancy, my child, I used to say, it's like even disrespected me. Breastfeeding would have temper meltdowns from going from one breast to another, and I was saying that from the very beginning. Educational wise, when you're based at a specialist trauma-based education, which we will hear from the CEO, Debra Thomas, later, they understand the difference between trauma-based behaviour coming from neurodiversity and from actual behavioural. Rod here is also a specialist in behaviour, looked after children, and there is a huge difference. One of my solutions is training, because as social workers, you're given the narrative that behaviour all comes from parental and not necessarily neurodiversity. So you're correct in everything you're saying.
But the effects.
Yeah, trauma effects, she said it's horrendous.
Yeah, the trauma effects. And many of the research samples we had, I mean, and Mary's case sort of bears that out, is that eventually there is a medical explanation. They call it medically unexplained symptoms, but they're medically unexplored symptoms too often. And the default position is nurture.
Well, we also know that there's a lot of work with gender scan and brain scan.
Yeah, yeah.
We don't look at that.
I think we're gonna,
I'm sorry to interrupt this
overstayed our
discussion.
welcome.
On the upside, we have booked the VIP lounge at the left bank. It's about a 10-minute walk. So these conversations can carry on from 1:30 in a different venue, because this is a rich conversation which I'm reluctantly going to draw to an end. Thank you so much, panel. Thank you very much for your questions. There'll be a 1-minute break while we set Beverley up for the next bit.
Right, are we ready? Shall I begin? Everyone sitting comfortably? Thank you, Maggie, for inviting me today. I'm Beverley Ward. I'm a writer rather than involved in social care or anything, and but I have had experience as a parent of many different services because I've got 2 neurodiverse children. I'm also neurodiverse myself, and my son had a chronic illness. So I'm relating to a lot of these themes, all of which come together in quite a catastrophic way for a lot of mothers in family court. I have experience of family court myself, but people who've been in family court will know that legally you're not allowed to speak about experience of family court. So I have to be very careful what I say about my own case. But I am the editor of this book that I've recently been working on called Right to be Heard, which is a collection of voices of survivors of coercive control and post-separation abuse. And I'm also an ambassador for Mums in Need, a Sheffield-based charity that supports women experiencing post-separation abuse. So I'm speaking from the position of those voices that I have in my head and in my hands. We're going to come on to how we talk about how things change, but first of all I just want to talk about the project, all of the women who've been involved in creating this book, which I ran some workshops with mothers and then also sought pieces from people online. They've all been taken through the family courts by abusive fathers, and in a surprising number of cases actually lose their children, and people are not aware of that. It's becoming more known about in the news since they started letting journalists into family court. But like a lot of these stories, it's horrifying, and you wouldn't know about it until you end up in that situation. These are just a few quotes from the people who have reviewed the book for us. It is for sale today. I do not want to take them all back to Sheffield on the train, so if anyone can buy one, I'd be so grateful. So first of all, let me explain what post-separation abuse is, because you may not know what it is. Basically, what people tend to assume is women in abusive relationships leave a relationship and then it's like everything gets better, where for a lot of women actually everything gets worse at that point. Because men who thrive on control lose control of their partner and then find other ways to continue control, particularly if they have shared custody of children. So that's through things like financial abuse, stalking and harassment, aggressive communication, manipulation and power games, and what they call discarding, neglectful and counter-parenting, which, a lot of mothers will have this experience of people not returning children when they're supposed to be returning, refusing to communicate about children, not following the agreed rules. And it causes endless stress and conflict for the mothers. The quotes around them, these are quotes from the pieces of writing in the book. It does make for very powerful reading. So this is a major reason why women actually stay in abusive relationships. And people say, why didn't she leave? Actually, they have a better chance of keeping their children safe if they stay as a buffer in the relationship. This is a model developed by somebody called Marianne Hester about the 3 planets. And so under the 3 planets, if a woman has a responsibility to keep her children safe from abuse. So if she is not protecting her children from an abusive partner, she can have her children removed because she's not doing her job properly, which is where the first example of mother blame comes in. And in the criminal court, she can get men prosecuted, theoretically, for coercive control. So a mother can think she's doing the right thing. She can prosecute the father for domestic abuse. She can stop contact because she's doing what social services are telling her to do, which is to protect the child from abuse. And then what the father will typically do is go to the family court, where until this week, the law hasn't changed yet, but there's a presumption of contact. So in the family court law, fathers have a right to contact, regardless of whether they're abusive, rapists, paedophiles, it doesn't matter, they should have contact with their child, and the mother becomes the person who is stopping the child from having contact. And what happens then in the family court is the attention turns from investigating the father for abuse to investigating the mother for stopping the contact with the father. What the father will often do in that situation, if he's an abusive man, obviously not all men are abusive, what he will often do is accuse the mother of parental alienation, which means that she has coached the children to reject the father. He will also, if there's any kind of special needs, accuse the mother of factitious illness, emotional abuse, mental illness. He will get her medical records if she's ever had antidepressants. All of that will come out. The mother will be investigated. The pseudoscience of parental alienation, this is a recent article that's come out in Sheffield by Jessica Bradley about the psychologist Maria Downs in Sheffield. This particular psychologist seems to have a pattern of behaviour where she is investigating. This goes back to what somebody was saying about how you expect professionals to help. So, mothers are assessed by psychologists. They think, great, the psychologist is going to understand that this is narcissistic abuse, this is coercive control. What this psychologist actually does is demonstrate that the mothers are manipulating the children to be against their fathers based on the pseudoscience of parental alienation, which comes from a paedophile apologist, Richard Gardner, from 40 years ago. And you can see here quotes from her where she's actually saying if a children does reveal abuse, it means they haven't been abused, because people who've actually been abused don't feel able to say they've been abused. So if a child is saying they've been abused by their father, it must be because the mother has told them that's what to say, and that is what she writes in her reports. And then the children are sent to live with their abusive fathers or taken into care. She's at the moment the journalist is in a landmark case to take this to the High Court to get the retrospective content of these reports represented by Charlotte Proudman, who some of you might have seen on the news recently, so it's a big deal. This is one of the poems from the book. These are reasons that family court might remove children from their mother. For example, they might speak too highly of her. For example, she might be too articulate. They might be too articulate. She might say she's telling the truth. She might say that she's well liked. They're not things you would usually expect children to be removed from their mothers for, but this is what happens in family court. So things are changing. In 2020, the Harm Report demonstrated that domestic abuse victims were very poorly served by the family court because of the pro-contact culture and the inadequate training. But as with all these things, the change is happening very slowly. In 2022, they developed Pathfinder court pilots, which are aimed to reduce the time spent in court. Some of these women are in court for like 4, 5, 10 years. It completely drains their finances. And I'm not looking at my notes, but one of the things that it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because these women are obviously, as other people are talking about, become very traumatized and distressed, as do the children. And I'm in touch with one mother at the moment whose child has been in court for 4 years, is now so distressed, demonstrating behavioural issues. Now they want to remove the child from the mother, because it's obviously the mother's fault that the child has behavioural issues, not the 4 years of trauma in family court. And obviously the mothers also then start to present in an anxious way, and then it's like, mum seems to be anxious, she must be damaging her child because she's anxious, let's take the child away. So it's horrendous what's happening. But this idea of like assessing people properly at the beginning, speaking to children properly at the beginning, is something that they're starting to do in the Pathfinder courts. In 2024, they did recognise that parental alienation syndrome has no evidential basis and is considered a harmful pseudoscience. It's still being used routinely in family courts, and what they do now is they reframe it, so they call it high conflict case, or they talk about the child splitting. So if a child is too positive about one parent and not about the other, that is evidence that the child has been coached to say good things about the mother, not that the mother is a good parent. Just last week, or a couple of weeks ago, October 2025, there's a new report, Everyday Business, found that domestic abuse is present in 87% of cases that reach family court. But in most of those cases, it's discounted straight away. People are told, don't mention domestic abuse in family court, no one will listen to you. The whole of family court really is domestic abuse, because all of this is post-separation abuse that the father can use the family courts to continue to punish the mother. It costs mothers hundreds of thousands of pounds to save their children, which is great for a man who likes to control women. And then just this week, it's all over the news, 21st of October, they've announced the plan to repeal the presumption of parental involvement. This is like women who have campaigned to get this taken away, so that children don't have to be forced into contact with an abusive parent. So these are some possible solutions, like the presumption of contact, number one, is like massive, that's absolutely massive, but somebody else mentioned training is really important. The professionals are not recognising what's happening as post-separation abuse. So that is urgently needed. What happens is it's reframed as high conflict instead. Screening for coercive control and post-separation abuse so things don't even get to court. Specialists who recognise it for what it is, like currently parents are forced into mediation. The mediator will shut down mediation saying, I can see this is abuse, but then that's not used as evidence in court. You're not allowed to mention that. The Pathfinder courts are a great thing. Better joined up care so that the three planets are not operating separately. That children are centred and spoken to as a number one priority. I feel that children need a place like Childline where they can phone and say, this is happening to me, and get some help, because at the moment, CAFCAS are not doing that job. Change to the way it's funded. Family courts are making a fortune, so whatever they're doing that, it's not in the court's interest to shorten cases. More legal aid, better information, like we were saying about knowing that this is what happens when you go into family court, and more transparency in terms of journalists and juries. What can you do? Buy our book. So the book, all the proceeds from this book go to Mums in Need, which supports mothers who are experiencing this, and also Mums in Need have a training programme ready to go for all professionals, which we'd love to share. This is my little video of the slide. The project was called Right to be Heard. This is online if you want to look at it. I can read the poem if I've got time, or I can open to questions. I have no idea what time we're on.
Well, we're going to stop it now. Thank you so much.
Right to be heard. They say sticks and stones can break our bones. We know this to be true. But sometimes words are weapons, and they leave bruises too. And sometimes pain is hidden, and scars are buried deep. From power struggles and silent treatment, secrets we must keep. We give ourselves while others take. It's spirits, not our bones, they break. We try to speak, but words are snatched. They're chewed up, twisted, and spat back into our faces. We learn to not take space up. In a lonely war privately fought, we're silenced by the family court. Trained to be quiet, we make ourselves small, until we have no words at all. Tongues cut out, we lose our voice. Our story's unwritten. We had no choice. But no one can stay quiet forever. An army of mothers, we now come together. We won't be silent any longer. United in anger, we are stronger. Faceless and nameless will reclaim our words. They can't restrain us. Let them do their worst. They told their tales, now we'll tell ours. Listen as we claim our power. Our words will grow wings and fly like birds. Our stories matter. We have a right to be heard.
Okay, we're going to have another 1 minute break just to shift some microphones. Please don't go too far. The coffee break is at 11:35, so you've not got much longer to wait for a drink, all right? I think we did it in 58.5 seconds. Right, so this is our SEND panel. So these are professionals and parents with experience of having working with SEND children. I'm going to hand you straight over to Debra Thomas, who's going to introduce herself. Everybody's going to introduce himself.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Hi, so I am Debra Thomas. I'm the CEO of GEM Schools. Okay, I've got to hold it to here. Up to there. Up.
Hello.
Oh,
really quite close.
Hello.
Really close.
Really close.
That's it.
Okay, everybody. So I trained as a teacher, okay? And yet throughout that training, there was almost no meaningful focus on special educational needs or disability, even though I worked at a college, a SEND college at the time. The message was clear. You were expected to teach a class full of children as if they all learned the same way. But real classrooms are not like that. Real children are not like that. In my years working in education and later as a therapeutic foster carer, I've seen the consequences of that lack of understanding up close. I've witnessed and at times experienced what happens when disability trauma or complex needs are misunderstood. Too often children are labelled as difficult when what they need is care. Too often mothers or fathers who often carry the weight of advocacy are dismissed, disbelieved, disempowered. It was witnessing this injustice that led me to become a specialist foster parent, because when you treat trauma with compassion rather than control, when you empower a child instead of punishing them for their pain, you see profound change. Early intervention transforms lives. We like to think of ourselves as a community that values fairness and inclusion and opportunity for every child, but we have to face a difficult truth. Our current systems are failing too many of our most vulnerable children, particularly those with special educational needs or disabilities. This crisis, the crisis in children's social care, cannot be separated from the crisis in education. When a child's needs go unmet in the classroom, the effects ripple outwards into homes, communities and lives. Anxiety grows, parents and carers become exhausted, and children who simply need understanding and support find themselves excluded, isolated, or even in care. Too many classrooms are still designed around a mythical average learner. Standardised tests, rigid timetables, one-size-fits-all teaching have left behind children whose minds work differently. Those with autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, sensory differences, trauma-related needs they're not broken. They are treated as problems to be managed rather than individuals with strengths to be nurtured. Here in Herefordshire, as across the country, parents are fighting daily battles for assessments, for education, health and care plans, for even the most basic support. Teachers, compassionate but exhausted, want to help, but are hampered by bureaucracy, funding shortfalls and lack of training. Exclusion, isolation and neglect are not inevitable. They're the result of decisions made about priorities, funding and values. When we choose uniformity over flexibility and convenience over compassion, we're choosing to tell children they don't belong. And there's another layer to this crisis, and this one demands urgent attention. As public provision struggles to cope, independent SEND schools are being opened or bought up by private investors who have identified an opportunity for profit. Some of these schools are now owned by hedge funds or overseas companies, whose primary obligation is not to the children in their care, but their shareholders. This means that public money provided by local authorities and taxpayers to support our most vulnerable children, is being diverted out of classrooms and into private pockets. Instead of being reinvested in staff, therapy, training or facilities, millions of pounds are leaving the system altogether. Let's be clear, every child with complex needs deserves the right specialist provision. Many independent schools are run by deeply committed educators who care passionately about their students. But when education becomes a marketplace, when care is being treated as a business opportunity, we are losing sight of what matters. Education should not be an asset class. Children's needs should never be a route to profit. And that is why I want to see a change in the law. I want to make it illegal to make a profit from SEND education. This is not just a matter of policy, it's a matter of principle. Public funds for SEND need to be ring-fenced for children's development, for their well-being and their futures, not extracted for dividends or bonuses. And I can say this with conviction because I speak from experience. I am the owner of an independent SEND school, a school that is proudly not-for-profit. Every penny that comes in Every penny that comes into our school is spent on the education, support and well-being of the children enrolled. Our staff are properly trained and they are fairly paid. Our resources are chosen to meet real needs. Our facilities grow because our students grow. We are living proof that an independent school can be sustainable and ethical. It is possible to run a successful, high-quality SEND school without making profit the goal. When you reinvest in people instead of pockets, when your focus is the child, not the balance sheet, something extraordinary happens. Children thrive, families heal, and communities strengthen. We need a system that invests in people, not portfolios, that values long-term stability and trust over short-term gain, that ensures every pound intended for a vulnerable child goes to that child. True inclusion is not about fitting children into a rigid system. It's about reshaping that system around those children. This means smaller class sizes where relationships can flourish. It means genuine investment in training and early intervention, because the earlier we provide support, the greater the impact for life. And it means building strong partnerships between education, health and social care. So families no longer have to fight their battles alone. And it means celebrating neurodiversity as a strength, recognising that these children bring creativity, honest focus and resilience to every environment they're part of. When a child is told day after day they're the problem, they start to believe it. But when they're seen, understood and supported, they thrive, and our whole community benefits. We must measure our success not by how well children fit a narrow standard, but by how well we help each child reach their full potential. So I think in Herefordshire and beyond that we need to stand together, teachers, parents, professionals, neighbours, try and rebuild a system that reflects our shared humanity. Let's say with one voice, no one should profit from the pain or potential of a child. Because a society that fails its most vulnerable children is a society in crisis. However, a society that invests in them, that listens, believes and acts, is a society of hope. So thank you.
Is this one working? I can't hear. Hello. So my name's Tracy Winchester. I'm from over the border in Worcestershire. We had the pleasure of the Director of Children's Services that I believe you've got now previously, so can relate greatly. I run SEND National Crisis Worcestershire, a parent campaign group over in Worcestershire. I also run North Worcestershire Autism Parent Support Group. I'm an occupational therapist by profession. And I am ultimately a parent carer for two amazing kids that have been failed, as so many of us have found in this room. 14 now and 11, both now doing education other than at school because there just isn't the services out there to meet their needs. I relate greatly to a lot of things that have been said. I guess I sadly consider myself quite lucky that things haven't developed as far down the line as some people have experienced in this room regarding parent blame, but we certainly have had a fair share of it. And that dates right back to the very beginning. I mean, my son in particular, both children are autistic, but my son has a PDA profile, demand avoidance profile, and I think that in particular is a particular set of needs that attracts a lot of attention in terms of parent blame as well. We found out that very early doors when he kind of fell out of school catastrophically with school refusal at the very beginning when he was 5 years old, at which point had no diagnosis, had no needs identified, despite the fact that we'd already sort of seen stuff and the preschool had given strategies to the first school. So that was our first discovery upon sort of going through the tribunal process of doing a subject access request and finding the lovely FII mentioned and a referral into social services. That was the first sort of little glimpse of that world, which was quickly thrown out, thank goodness, but nonetheless, like many have said, once it's there and people get to read it, things seem to change. And it never quite went away completely. Even down to the most recent, we've had, I think we're up to number 5. I'm looking at husband for tribunals over the years with the 2 kids. But the most recent tribunal, literally, which as it stands right now, so I'm afraid Worcestershire really aren't much better, if not equally bad. We are applying for legal aid to go to the High Court ourselves, so know full well judicial review, off we go, because of they seem to think it's a choice to whether they want to put in place the tribunal order or not. But once again, during the tribunal, the social worker, that because there was a lot of social care content in our tribunal, did the whole sort of twisting it on its head that we weren't enabling their independence because they were at home, like we were creating it. We were deliberately sort of stopping them from accessing education, all the usual stuff, despite the fact that there's so many services involved, so many professionals. I had, if you like, I mean, the interesting thing with being an occupational therapist from my perspective, so I had to have a fellow occupational therapist as a witness, and it's brilliant to literally see the live action of the fact that she can say the stuff and they believe her straight away because she's there in her professional capacity. I say the same things, but I'm just making a big deal out of nothing, or I'm fabricating, or so it's just fascinating to see that sort of play out right in front of you, and the same issues are carrying on now. So we've had a change of social worker. We're yet to see how this is going to pan out. We've now been told we need a child in need meeting before we can access the respite that the tribunal ordered. So we can, the barriers carry on, and who knows where we're going to end up. But it's an interesting one, and I wish you all good luck, as we all do, on our journey ahead. And I'm really grateful to have been invited to come along and speak today, because I think we all need to stick together in this. I'd happily like to see some more stuff with us over the border. Perhaps we can, work together a bit more. The more of us that come together, the better, I think, because we're facing very similar issues. And yes, the previous Director of Children's Services has unfortunately left the culture behind. So we've got a lot of the people that used to work for us still continuing the same old decisions. So anyway, thank you for listening.
Is this on? Hello, can you hear me? Maybe. Oh, I'm short and they're making me stand. I'm standing, yeah. Let me just get my notes. I'm of a certain age so that the memory is gone. I'm going to diverge a little bit because I've listened to what lots of people have said. So just to give context, my proudest moment has been a parent. The hardest moment I've ever experienced when I applied for teacher training was being called into a head teacher's office who'd done me a wonderful reference, and he quietly said, "Here are the notes my teachers have made on you because you're an over-fussy parent." He said, "They're supposed to be kept for 25 years, but you can have them and go and burn them." So wouldn't be allowed today, but people make judgments on you. And then on the flip side, as a safeguarding lead, the judgments made on you as parents are out of fear, because us professionals, we are held accountable for a standard student for 25 years on anything we write, anything we say. For a looked after child, we're held accountable for 75 years. So there is an element of fear. If we get this wrong, we're going to be in court. So sometimes things are said against parents and against other people just because people are covering their backs, and mistakes are made and judgments that are wrong are made, and people that aren't qualified to make judgments are making judgments. So, right. So let me get into what I wrote at 1 o'clock in the morning. So we're all experts on education because we've all been through the system. For some of us, you thrived, and for others, it was a struggle and the system seemed to be against you. For myself, I attended a high school that sat in the shadow of a steelworks in Cardiff. My school was at the bottom of the league tables for academic achievement, but top nationally for teenage pregnancy. The latter had nothing to do with me. We thought it was snow falling on us, but it was actually soot for the steelworks. I went into teaching though because I wanted to make a difference. I got into trouble as a mainstream head teacher because I circumvented or diverted from the norm in my last primary setting with my SEN students and my challenging students, because when they couldn't cope, my students would be found in my quad with the chickens, with the hens, with the rabbits, even had a goat and wild ducks landing. But why weren't they in class? And I was making them feel safe, I was making them feel comfortable. We were doing lots and lots of education, but we were doing it in a different way. But I was a bit of a troublemaker, apparently. I got into even more trouble because each morning I wasted valuable education time by organising breakfast and social communication time for 200 disadvantaged children. And we had breakfast club. So we had half an hour with the children making breakfast for each other, talking to each other, watching news round, developing social skills. And you know what? They went into their lessons fed and happy, but they were missing English and maths, so that got stopped too as well. I left our state system when I was told to sack my best teacher because her class progress data was below expected. I took the local authority into the class and showed them that the classroom environment was absolutely amazing, and I explained that she had nearly 30% of her class on the SEN register. At that point, I then got told off again, a bit of a pattern, that I could only have 12% of my children on the SEN register, so it was a failing on the teacher. So the teacher had made them have all these additional needs. Not that an amazing teacher had identified the needs and was having amazing progress, but they were below age expected. The classroom was brilliant, but we were failing. I was banging my head against a brick wall. I suggested the teacher went and got another job. She's now a head teacher. I was right, she was amazing, they were wrong. I moved on to a college, and I had the challenge and the privilege to be a head teacher of a college with students with extreme levels of social anxiety and autism who'd fallen out of the education system. We'd go into homes and find children that had been gaming for 6 years, hadn't left rooms, couldn't walk out into the garden. And you know what? So stupidly, we'd become their friends. We'd take them out. We'd learn to walk to McDonald's. I got told off for taking kids to McDonald's. We'd learn to socialise, get on a bus, go on a train. And eventually we got those children into school and back into education. As part of the college, we also took the most dangerous, deemed dangerous students within England. And these children, nobody else could cope with, nobody would take them out on trips, nobody else could educate them, but we did it in a completely different way. We got them into education, and by treating them as human beings, suddenly, strangely, they started succeeding. So, unfortunately, our education system sees what has gone wrong and not why things have gone wrong. And sadly, the education healthcare plan is too often used as a weapon to fail and to move children out to a new setting. Because there's a huge pressure on schools to achieve high academic and attendance data. And if your SEN children, your autistic children, your looked after children are bringing those figures down, we don't want to help them, we want to get rid of them. Because that's how schools are judged. The college I moved to was set up by a complete maverick who believed if you changed the education environment and broke from tradition, listened to students, listened to parents, taught in a different way, you'd create opportunities for those that the system has written off. We strangely offered students emotionally available adults before that phrase even existed. We offered counselling to adverse childhood experiences, and we gave one-to-one lessons. Those lessons might be in one of our 17 cars, might have been on the Malvern Hills while we were walking the therapy dogs, could be in a kayak while we were going down the River Wye. And you know what? We did some of our best lessons in McDonald's eating a burger, So Healthy Schools Initiative, I failed every time. So we even dangerously and naively took students out on trips. We took students that were supposed to be unreachable, and we did Duke of Edinburgh with them. And you know what? They absolutely thrived. Do you know what, it must have worked, because twice in my tenure at the college we were finalists in the Worcestershire Education Awards, and our founder was invited to Parliament to discuss why the education system was failing students with SEN needs. He was asked to go on the Education Committee in London, and he told them that would be a waste of his time. He wanted to be with his students. More recently, my college was purchased by a large independent education company, which we hoped would bring huge opportunities. I was proud to announce that my one college achieved 10% of all their GCSE results. So one college out of 110 schools, and we achieved 10% of their GCSE results, and even more of their vocational results, which I was very, very proud of. On the downside, being owned by hedge fund investors, they took a significant percentage of my budget before I received it. The money was gone. Again, 4 schools out of 110 were in budget. I kept mine in budget, but by still giving the children quality education. I won't say that I was there on the weekends painting all the classrooms. You don't need to know that. That's how I kept my costs down. After 10 years, broken-hearted, I had to make the decision to leave because I was being directed to move my students back into full classes. They didn't deserve one-to-one teaching. We were taking them to McDonald's too much and spending too much money. And a bespoke approach wasn't needed, and we were taking them out on too many off-school sites, and they would be better off being in class, being taught from a blackboard, a Victorian method that I didn't want to do. So, you know, broken-hearted I left, but in my experience of working with SEN students, the group that stood out significantly were the looked after children. I'm a proud adopted young man, you know, so the looked after children that were coming into my care, I could understand what they were going through. But the whole system is broken. There are good social workers, there are good people in social services, but it is totally and utterly underfunded, and you know the system is broken, and the high quality support that looked after children need is not there. I've stood in my car park with a social worker turn up and drop off plates, mugs, cups, saucers and a microwave, who's told me I haven't got time to take the lack child to their independent living setting, aka a bed sit. I'm leaving it with you. And you know, after school, we've taken children to bed sits, we've set them up, and then got in trouble because out of our own pocket, we bought them in internet connectivity and a TV so they could game and self-regulate. But I shouldn't be doing that. They didn't deserve it. You know, I'm not teaching them a life lesson. But you know, they would have much rather the accommodation to be smashed up. Unfortunately, care is becoming profit-driven, exactly like Debbie said. So a lot of the care homes, you know, the money is not going towards the children. Then with mental health, you know, I'm being told by professors and key people that children with SEN are children with autism, ASD, ADHD, they're more likely to suffer with mental health conditions. So the evidence is there, but the system says no. Every time I make a referral to CAMS, as soon as they see an EHCP, those children do not have a mental health need. Those children have got an educational diagnosis, it's back to the school to sort it out. So I pioneered mental health first aiders, I pioneered bringing in counselling, I pioneered bringing in trauma-informed approaches because I couldn't get what I needed for the children out of the system. So even with social services, you make a referral and you get told you don't meet threshold. You don't meet threshold for early help. You don't meet threshold for child in need. You don't meet threshold for child protection. So, you know, all of the early help has to come from the school. So again, the job in school's getting bigger and bigger. With CAMS, I had a child stand on a bridge over the M5 and decided not to jump. CAMS referral gets turned down, doesn't meet threshold. How would it have met threshold? It would have met threshold if they were actively suicidal, aka if they'd have jumped onto the motorway, survived, they would then have had a psychologist to support them. So the whole system is racked against the most vulnerable. It's racked against the children in care, it's racked against our looked after children, it's racked against our ASD children, our ADHD children, and it's absolutely broken. The white paper, thank God, it's been deferred for another few months. I pray this is our opportunity to put things right, but you are not being listened to. The parents are not being listened to, schools aren't being listened to. The whole focus of the white paper is to reduce money, is to put children back into mainstream. The answer is to improve mainstream, but to value the independent sector, to value the alternative provision, to let children learn through kayaking, to learn through farms, to learn through experience, and not have a one-size-fits-all approach. But if you guys as parents do not shout loud and strong, the system will shrink, the support for your children will shrink, and children that need the most help will be put back into mainstream. And if we don't shout loud enough together, that will happen, and that will be the decision at the end of next year.
Yeah.
We're running rather over time here, so
my fault, sorry.
No, all very interesting.
I'll just give it a quick. My situation again is I've said for the one person who's an adult now who I'm still supporting. I've had 5 legal processes. I can't talk about 2 of them because they are family courts, but I can talk about the 3 SEND tribunals, which I've won every SEND tribunal. A SEND tribunal is a parent with a really complex young person. Bearing in mind my child unusually had intervention at nursery level. You didn't have resources then at CAMS to be diagnosed under the age of 5, was diagnosed at the age of 3 and medicated, and I'm still battling for that person, and they're 23. So I've had these 5 cases, but every time you go in the tribunal, SEND tribunals are fact-based evidence. Family courts are opinions. So what everybody is saying here, which is why there's the need for people that are social services side of it, on that side is very, very difficult. But what we do need is not-for-profit in educational settings to become more holistic and open. Because as a SEND parent, to have to put an ethos programme together when you're trying to maybe hold down a job and you've got the day-to-day, it's really difficult. We do need to unite nationally. We do need to pull together from Worcester to Derby to Wales, because the Welsh system already has the educational system that they're trying to bring into England, and it doesn't work. Teachers should not be responsible for SEND. Teachers now have enough to do, and we need to train, we need to support. I've had brilliant social workers over the years, I've had brilliant educational people, I've had brilliant medical people, and none of them have been enough to a voice, and safeguarding issues happen. As a parent, why would I make up my child's diagnosis that happened at Birmingham City Hospital with 3 experts? The person that I refer to isn't even safe to this date, and that's not okay. Safeguarding issues are matters because of misunderstanding, and parent blaming needs to stop, and we need to listen and pull it all together nationally. Thank everybody for coming. We're really pleased to keep this dialogue going, and please do, join us to make a difference, like Rod says, and Rod and Debra are trying to do. So thank you.
We promised you coffee at 11:35, so I think we're going to stick to that. We've got time for questions after the break, so we called it a working break in the hope that you will think about solutions, you will be writing them down, you will be thinking about what you can share later in terms of where we go from here. So yeah, the coffee's over there, there's coffee, there's tea, there's squash, there's water, there's biscuits, and we're starting again at 11:50.
Everybody see? He'll be in trouble with me now, because he's always in trouble with somebody, is Rod. Normally Debra. So Rod is actually the executive head of the GEM school as well, because he wanted to work for not-for-profit, because obviously, as you can tell, he's passionate about his calling. Now, when Maggie set up this meeting and this convention and event, what she really wanted us all to put our minds to is to think about the solutions. So we've all got one solution each on the SEND panel, which is coming from a SEND perspective. My solution is training. I would like to see more training, not just with social services, our social worker said she had no training at all when it came to neurodiversity and SEND. I'd like to see specialist training also in education. My daughter, I'm very proud to say, is a trainee teacher, and when she was doing her part of her teacher training, she only had 2 small sessions on SEND, and she could pick from as diverse as dyslexia to Down syndrome and everything in between. How does a teacher, and how can we expect a teacher to deliver on SEND with a lack of training? But we can't, it's impossible. And what I'd really say to the council is, please don't spend money on FFI training, because Hereford has used an unqualified person for FFI and spent more money on FFI than they have on SEND training, which you can actually get those statistics. So my solution, I would be shouting very loud, is we need to be more supportive, we need to be kinder to professionals, we can't blame them for seeing the behaviour and not behind it. We need training.
I haven't got one word for my solution, but my solution is for all of you, professionals, parents, and even the students, the children, to act with one voice. You are being dragged down. The Scandinavian model is being applauded because all of their SEN provision is done in mainstream schools. We need to have diversity of approach. You need to stand up between now and the end of 2026 when the decisions are made and say that you want diversity. You want mainstream units that can be fantastic. You want farm schools, you want alternative provisions, you want independent schools, all offering different things, because your children with SEN needs are all totally different. It's not one size fits all. You want something that is perfect for your child and not perfect for the public purse.
Just picking one really. I guess one of the main things that really bugs me because of decision making not being maybe as objective as it could be, or at least opinions being heard, is a really easy win would be for parent carers to be enabled to be on things like, and Dan will at the back who will talk later will agree with me, on things like scrutiny panels and such like. It's such an easy thing for them to do, and highly suspicious as to why they won't. So just sort of, and that could filter all the way down into sort of schools and just giving opportunities for parent carers to be part of the decision making, and truly not just consultative. The whole co-production thing, probably just triggers me anyway with saying it because it's nonsense, but also, and I don't know how much of an issue it is in Herefordshire, to be quite honest, but that shouldn't necessarily therefore equal the parent carer forum as well. That should be independent completely, a parent carer having the opportunity. Yeah, exactly. They need to be independent, so that there's just absolutely no conflict of interest. That'd be my main one for now.
Hi, yes, you might guess what mine is, and I'm going to pinch words from Dan up there. Thank you, Dan, you were speaking earlier. There are 2 areas where it's really easy to make profits at the moment. One is SEND education, and the other is vets. And the one that is getting all of the news and things is about vets, and it should be about children. Okay, so I want to see profits being illegal for children, totally illegal, but definitely reduced, so that you're not getting people go, oh, I'm having a bit of that. No, we want people who care to be doing this job, not people who think, right, great, I'll be in Bali for 3 months on this, and that's how I feel. Okay.
Any questions from the floor? Can you shout, Rachel, or do you want the microphone?
Well, over 4 years ago, my son was removed from my care because of behavioural partly because of behavioural issues, and I was blamed for the way his behaviour was. Since then, he has been on an EHCP, still no diagnosis, still no even looking at him having neurodivergency. Independents have seen him and have said he has neurodivergent needs. He is now in a special needs school with an EHCP and still no diagnosis. What can I actually do to actually help my son? Because as far as I'm concerned, he should not be in that school, especially when he's a very smart, intelligent little boy. And how am I supposed to even get anywhere when I am not listened to and I am constantly blamed? I see him once every 10 weeks and any decrease in his behaviour and I'm blamed. What can I do?
I can answer that one. Is this one? Yeah. I'm quite loud anyway, so I think people can probably hear me. Even hello? Even with an education healthcare plan, even if you have a care order, you do not lose your rights for a SEND tribunal. So you can start a SEND tribunal process. You can use IPSI, which is at no cost. And you can also, if you feel that, for me, I've used Sunshine Support. They have webinars as well that are not a financial barrier. But I've used a professional SEND consultant to write education healthcare plans and to put pre-action protocols. You can actually call for a diagnosis in the education healthcare plan. It can be funded that way. So your route is IPSI as a parent, and if there is any care orders, in my case I had a care order, it does not differ from your rights in the education healthcare plan tribunal. So you can get them diagnosed.
There's another question.
Thank you for letting me speak again. Solutions, I'd like to see, in schools, it's all education. I want to see outcomes. I left school with no, well, I was expelled from school, but I left with no exams whatsoever, okay? So outcomes is what I'm interested in, and in schools, it's whether we pick up these issues at low level. So pastoral care is out the window because schools are judged on what results they get, and I think it's totally wrong. And if schools were introduced more pastoral care, I think a lot of these low-level issues that children have picked up, especially after they were locked away for a couple of years and not being able to go anywhere, they didn't mature. There's an age group coming through now that didn't mature through COVID, and it's caused lots of issues. So one of the solutions I would suggest, and take it away and shout about it, is more pastoral care in schools. It is down to schools, but also the local authority have got a little bit of control on schools, however, not budgets, but pastoral care is a big thing, so please take that away and preach that.
You had a lady there, Maggie, in the yellowy as well.
Hi, it's more of an observation really. I'm an SEN, I'm a single parent carer. My daughter's actually been full-time SEN education since she was 3, so that's 19 years. My frustration is, even having the HCP, it means nothing the paper it's worth. Because the last 2 years she actually got another diagnosis, which has been the most disabling, yet it's not compliant, so she can't access anything. She's out of education in an EOTIC, education other than in college. Again, she's failed massively. I don't know what's going to happen to her in the future. But me, as a campaigning single parent, my biggest bugbear is the local authority, because the buck stops with them. They make the decisions, and I just feel if you've got a local authority who are not motivated to look after our vulnerable children, and they're failing SEN, and they're being so unlawfully compliant, they're failing all our children. And for me, that's the biggest frustration. There's no accountability, there's no responsibility, and there is just nothing. We're fed up of being parent blamed. Asking for help is a massive lottery because you are risking losing your children. I've worked through domestic abuse, I've had mental health issues, that is thrown at you. If you can't dare mention if you've had sexual abuse yourself, because that will be used against you. The system is corrupt. You know, too many local authorities are complicit, and in Worcester, health, education and social work do not communicate. They are not joined up, and it is mismanagement of money, not so much funds, it is mismanagement. There are extortionate salaries that they have massive increases, and unfortunately in Hereford you have the rejects that we had from Worcester. Your Director of Social Services is Tina Russell. We asked for her resignation year on year on year because she sat literally that far away from me and said, yes, we are breaking the law. No, your children are not, you cannot not have a choice. So we've had those conversations, and when you have people who are making those decisions, who are not held accountable by councillors, MPs, because I've campaigned and tried to do it as Tracy, we are very much campaigning, and we go to Parliament, we ask these questions, we are ignored, we are gagged. And this has gone year on year on, because our children will end up institutionalised. Why don't we just throw away the key and put them in the asylum, because no one cares? And
We
that's
care,
the problem.
we care, that's
no,
why we're
no,
here,
you
we
do.
care.
That's what I'm saying.
But sure enough, we're going to unite.
Listen, we've been doing it, you know, we're doing it on our own. You're not, you know.
But we need each other now.
Absolutely. Thank you. We do all need each other,
hear
and we need to start fighting.
We want you.
The ground has been laid for the next session on state engagement with civil society. So I've got one more question over here. If it could be super quick.
Thank you. Super quick question for the room. There's been a lot of questions about individual children. Would you like a forum to come and ask for advice about what to do and come forward? Would that be useful for parents and carers? Because we can make one if there's a need for it.
Also, when they reach the age of 16, 18 and they're left school, which my son was in a specialist school as well, they're cannon fodder, they're just left. There's nothing. There's no support. Talk about college, talk to the bloody wall, you know. They're just abandoned. There's nothing, there's no follow-up, there's no proper care planning for them post-16, post-18. And that is really something that I feel very strongly about.
When parents are asking for help, when the children are at 16, they've got the HCPs, and you're asking for help, the process is dragged out and dragged out. You're asking for assisted living, you're asking for mentors, you're asking for this, but the whole process is slowed down because you get to a point where the answer then becomes easily a no. If you really want support, you've got to do it before they're 16, because you'll get nothing. I am still in contact with looked after children who are now in bed sits, who are rotting away. Conversely, I've got looked after children who go into Durham University when they were told by social services that their aspirations were too high, and they're now reading law in Durham University. So it can go either way, but the number of children that are sat in rooms now gaming, and they used to be in care, they used to be in the looked after system with a lot of support, sometimes not good support, but a lot of support. But once they get to 18, 19, there's no support at all, and they'll see an advocate once every 6 months.
I'm curious to see the school that my son went to, the friends from there, all the three missions, I'm curious to see a graph of how well these children, and predominantly...
Yeah, fact-based evidence with what Professor Luke Clements says. We just got another question up there. Yeah, and then we'll go on to the panel. And then we can take this, please everybody come over to the left bank and let's continue these discussions. Everybody's opinions and views are valid, everybody here.
So a very close friend of mine, ever since I've known her, she was removed from her parents for the reasons that meant that they couldn't take care of her from the age of 7. She was placed in a care home with a foster family, and she was abused and neglected for well over 10 years. They ran a non-profit volunteer organisation, so they were deemed pillars of the community. Social services didn't realise what was going on, or they didn't care. She developed very severe mental health issues. The family were given other foster children throughout the period that she was with them, and whenever the other children were there, the abuse and neglect simply transferred from her onto the new children, which were younger than her. And then as soon as those children were removed by social services, the neglect and abuse just transferred straight back onto her, and they did profit from being foster carers. They did benefit from it. They ended up going on holidays, they ended up doing these sorts of things, but because of their position in the community and how they were viewed, no one cared, and it only took until very, very recently for something to be done about it. And she's an adult now. How would you propose that this is prevented? Because she was removed from her parents, but placed into a neglected foster family.
The next bit is
Yeah.
got the solution.
Can I just say that the state holds parents to very high standards in terms of care. Nadine Zahawi, when he was Minister for Children, said that if there's any iota, any inkling of harm to a child, the child should be removed immediately. He said that in Parliament, and that set the tone for how social workers were being told to respond to any risk to a child from a parent. We need to have the same level of scrutiny of corporate parents who are failing children and foster parents who are failing children. Okay. One more comment from Mel on behalf of Tracy.
Maggie, there's a lady that's not had a say.
Her apologies, her son's in hospital, and as you saw from the video, I think you can imagine the trauma that he and Tracy have experienced through parental blame and fabricated or induced illness. I myself am a mum who's lost custody because of Phi. One of the things that Tracy has suggested, she believes that Section 17 of the Children's Act needs to be mandatory. Nothing's going to change when local authorities have no reason to allocate funds under Section 17 to children who have those needs. So that's one of the things that she has raised. Bear with me. She also is quite vocal about the Children Wellbeing and Education Bill, as I am too. And she mentions that it's not a wellbeing bill. Wellbeing is only mentioned twice in the bill, and one of them is in the title. Parents need to come together, join together, and take back parental responsibility, because we don't pay our taxes for others to do that for us. And it does certainly follow on from what Nikki was saying. I put some leaflets on the tables for people, but please come and see me if you'd like details about the support that Support Not Separation and Legal Action for Women provide. We also have, of course I've just lost the screen, haven't I? We also have a monthly picket outside of the Family Court in London. It's on the first Wednesday of every month, and we hold self-help groups every month for mums who are going through these situations, whether it's SEND, whether they're mothers with disabilities, whatever the situation, we're there as a self-help group, and we bring years and years of experience. So please do get in touch. Let me know if you need any details. There was more I was going to say, but I think we've run out of time. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay.
One person, sorry.
That lady there did want to raise it. She hit there.
Yellow.
Yellow, green.
Right. Yeah.
How hard is it to have microphones with an on-off switch?
Very hard.
Finding the on-off switch, yeah. No, I work in upstream interventions and particularly interested in the SEND pupils. I just wanted to say that I have written to Tina Russell in September, and I haven't received a response, which is most unusual on this subject. We're looking, I'm also leading the play group for the Institute for Outdoor Learning, a new group that's been put together, and we're going to be submitting evidence to Parliament as part of the debate going on over the next 8 months. So if anyone would like to offer support with this approach, upstream interventions, then I'd be very grateful.
Thank you, everybody. We're going to have one of those 1-minute breaks. Please don't disappear. We've got state engagement with civil society coming up next. So 1 minute while we set up. We're behind schedule. We don't want to keep you late. Okay, so the first thing to say is John Browning, OBE, sends his apologies. He's laid up sick. He was going to talk to us about a publication, a government publication, which is called the Civil Society Covenant. You can Google it, and it sets out how government, so that's local government, national government, any layer of state body, should be interacting with civil society. So we've heard a lot about how one of the solutions across the board is for families to be listened to and heard. So I'm now going to hand you over to, are we going to start with Bryony?
We're going to start with Jennie.
Jennie, okay. I'm going to let them introduce themselves.
You're going to move that up so we can see the crucial bit. It aims to...
Is this thing on? Can you hear me? Yeah. All right, that's good. Well, I'm here on this panel with people who are far exceeding me in capacity. I'm here because perhaps I can take the long view, having once been a councillor on Herefordshire Council, and I became involved with children's scrutiny. And it was perhaps the most harrowing period in my adult life, trying to understand the dislocation in communication between what the public were experiencing and the fact-based, evidence-led approach of officers who were presenting what appeared to me to be a very different story. So I won't go on too long, but just to say that we tried quite hard and did, in fact, get some parent voice into the room, the chair, Philip Howells, and myself, and I thought we were heading in the right direction until, in my childish way, I believed that when a children's commissioner was appointed to Herefordshire, I had a sort of Enid Blyton response to it. Oh, fantastic, this will be good, this will really improve circumstances in Herefordshire. But my first meeting with this woman was that she said, I want you to consider closing down public questions. And really, I felt as if the rug being pulled from under our feet. I just thought, well, you know, how will that do any good? Because as an elected councillor, I felt my role was to become that interface between the public and civil servants, to present evidence that might not necessarily come to light. And so that was a pretty horrifying experience. And I'm really glad I'm out of it, and I really admire those people who are still in it.
And I'll just get a timer because otherwise I will ramble. So I'm Dan Boatright-Greene. I'm the County Councillor for Pershore in Worcestershire, and I've sat on scrutiny now for way too long for children's services. Just as a bit of an understanding of my background, I went to school in the very late 80s, early 90s, and someone very quickly picked up there's something a bit wrong about me. That was their description. And very quickly went through the old statement kind of approach. I was very lucky, I was around the army, which meant that they actually got through it very quickly. They picked up on the fact that I couldn't tie shoelaces, had no concept of space, fall over a lot, usually have a broken something at some point. My current one is a broken rib. At the same time, I can do incredibly complex equations in my head that no person in their right mind should be able to do. So it was very quickly that realisation, there's something that we need to do here. So I was diagnosed eventually with a neurological condition which is currently unnamed, and as I go through my life I hope it will be named at some point, hopefully not after me, but it does manifest itself with ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, epilepsy, and as I've discovered recently, there is an element of Tourette's to it, which my mum didn't tell me about until about 4 weeks ago when she said, oh, I didn't think that's a real thing. So I'm generally unfiltered, which is a bit of a problem when you go into politics, because people want you to do things in a certain way and act a certain way. So it's been highly problematic. At the same time, I had a lot of fantastic people around me who managed to help me with actually going through kind of the academic side of things. So don't ever ask me to do certain things, but I was able to go into archaeology and geology. I was really well supported. I went to the right university and I did the right things. And I was the first person in my family to get A-levels at a university. So it's one of those where I feel incredibly lucky that I've been in those situations where there's been people being able to support me throughout. I don't think any of them have ever been trained in that particular area. So when I became a teacher, that was one of those things I always said, well, that's what I'm going to do. So I have to accept the fact that there is not the right training to deal with people like me. And therefore we need to try and pick them up. So I was the first person to ever teach A-level geology to blind students. And one of the questions they get asked in A-levels is, what colour is this? And still to this day, I do not understand how all 5 of them were able to correctly identify a colour based on feel. I don't know. They could explain it to me in their way, but it made absolutely no sense. So I know that we can do education in a way where people can access it. I know that. It's just you've got to think outside the box, and you've also got to accept the fact that someone might get predicted an A at some point and they might only get a C. And at that particular time, that's winning. Because that person may have been through their kind of mental health challenges, or that someone may have died, or something awful may have happened to them in their lives. And at that particular time, that C is a win. And this is something that is the reason I ended up leaving teaching, because I was sick and tired of being told that an individual was failing because at that particular time they had achieved something which was positive for them, but something on a spreadsheet says they should have achieved something else. And so I left teaching in 2022 in a bit of a blaze of glory, if I'm absolutely honest, because that tends to be how I like to do things. And I'd already been elected as a county councillor in Worcestershire. At the time, it was horrendous. Every single scrutiny meeting, all of these very valid questions were being asked by parents. So I was then sat there going, well, actually, could you just tell us the answer to these very valid questions? I was met with eye rolls, with tutting. You don't understand. I was met with quite a lot of aggression, being singled out because I was quite happy to say what was right to be said at the time. I was challenged repeatedly about the fact that I didn't know my position, that my position as an elected member was not to ask those questions. I was routinely told that I didn't understand. Well, I have the lived experience. I know full well what it's like. I can honestly say there are ways to get people into a learning setting and to learn if you actually just think about it. Also, I'm sorry, 9 till 4, are you kidding me? Most days I have a horrible night. It's usually around 11:30 I go off a cliff. So, as a full-grown adult, I know that you have to work with people. So it's one of those where I've always said that we need to get more people into politics who are not thinking in their kind of professional setting, in that professional way, because that professional way isn't real, it's not a thing. It's just they want you to sit in that box, and that's how they want you to do it. So I think I've given you a full explanation of why I've ended up sitting here, and I blame a couple of people over here for doing it.
Hi everyone, so I'm Bryony, Shannon. I'm also from Sheffield, and I am the author of Rewriting Social Care, which is essentially, it's come from, I've worked in and with local authorities in adult social care departments for about 20 years. My background is in information and communication, so I'm not a social worker, but I came into the world of social care and felt like I had to learn a whole new language because it was just all so complicated. I didn't understand any of it. Kind of learned it, started using it, and then started questioning it a bit more and started to realise kind of how key I think the language is in terms of how we perceive what adult social care should be all about and how it actually is, and how we can shift that kind of narrative. So the book sort of talks about the way that we talk about people, and I think it was Rob that mentioned about treating people as humans, and I think a lot of the way that we talk about people, we don't talk about people, we talk about service users and cases and clients, and that sort of dehumanising narrative puts that distance between people working in systems and people seeking support in systems. We lose often the purpose of social care, the purpose of organisations. I was really struck by reading Luke and Anna's book about, which says really straight up front, the primary responsibility of any state is to support family life. And I think we forget that. I think my background is very much adult social care rather than children's social care, but so much of what you said today has resonated. And certainly within adult social care, the legislation is very clear, the guidance is very clear, that the core purpose of adult care and support is to help people to achieve the outcomes that matter most to them. So we seem to forget that along the way. And I think we need to get back to the law, back to people's rights, get back to that. And I think quite often the language gets in the way of that. And then when we think about practice, when we think about social work practice, I think the way that we recruit social workers, if you look, and I have looked at the language of job adverts, is very much the kind of the transactional, doing things to people. So it's all about managing complex cases and screening and triaging and referring and assessing and doing things to people rather than about relationships. And so the part of the book is about that shift in practice, really, to move away from segregation, to focus on belonging, to move away from the kind of the dominance of fear, focus on love, because you never hear anybody talk about love in social care, which strikes me as quite ridiculous. Move away from assessment to really focus on conversations and understanding. Shift away from blame to really focus on curiosity and being curious rather than just putting labels on people and that's the end of the conversation. And moving away from doing things to people to really working with and working alongside people as part of a relationship. And I think it's often the relationships that are totally absent from social care because it's so focused on processing people through a system.
Thank you. I'm not here to say anything other than to ride shotgun, really, and you've done very well. Thank you very much. I mean, it's very interesting to hear a former, really eminent counsellor talk about the difficulty in being listened to as a counsellor with, in a way, officers who should be, you know, listening to what the counsellor says rather than saying, we don't want to hear that. To an existing counsellor, I don't know how much longer you're going to be one, who is asking for valid questions to have valid answers. I don't know if those happen. And really inspiring sort of idea about changing the way social care is managed. And what is often forgotten is the managerial structures that people at the coalface have to operate under in schools, in hospitals, in social work. And they don't really have much choice over the language that they use. And that's sort of about liberating them at the coalface to make decisions.
So, you know, with the benefit of hindsight, although I do feel that, you know, I drew that conclusion quite early on in my counselling days, that the balance of purpose for, well, I don't know whether it's any institution, it does appear to be with the post office and government and everything, but of the institution of local authority is about reputational damage. So that it disables parent voices coming into the room because they don't, you know, they actually don't want the problem, even if they know that there has been a problem, to be publicly aired. And there were a couple of things that I suggested as a counsellor, and I'm sure there are, well, definitely, I don't know, there are counsellors in the room that would be able to say how many of Karen Harmer's recommendations have actually been fulfilled. So there was an inquiry with parent and families who had been harmed by the practice in social services. And it was very harrowing, as today has been, listening to you all here. My heart is once again broken by the things I've been hearing. But so the point is, you know, when you hear those things, I mean, we had an open forum in children's scrutiny for parents to come in, and it was often really harrowing. And then it's set up a bit like a courtroom. You only have 3 minutes, and it's on camera, and you can ask not to be filmed, but they're already in a traumatized state. So one of the solutions which I felt was really important was to have trauma awareness training throughout the council. Now, I don't think that's happened throughout the council, and certainly when children and young people's scrutiny was set up under our remit, I was waiting and asking for trauma awareness training to be given to the councillors in the room. That hadn't happened. I think maybe a few senior officers got it. So that was one of the solutions, and I think that would be very helpful. But I think the other part of it is to have a forum where parents and families can directly access counsellors and aren't necessarily filmed. So the only access point is through the complaint system or through public questions at children's scrutiny, and that's now been, would you say triaged? I mean, it's basically it goes through democratic services, and they say, oh, you can ask this, oh, you can't ask that, and they can their rule is law. It can be really arbitrary, the reasons that they give for questions not being asked. So there needs to be a forum where you're not filmed, where democratic services aren't trying to protect reputational damage, and where councillors can actually hear, and then maybe some change would happen.
Trying to come up with an answer of how long do I really want to be a councillor, and I've already said I exceeded my political ambitions the day I got elected. I had absolutely no intention of doing it, and I think I'm just here out of sheer bloody mindedness at this point. I think one of the biggest problems we have is that if you're willing to get elected, you also need to be willing to undergo the scrutiny side of things, and that's on both sides. That means when you make a decision, you need to be willing to accept the fact that people are not going to agree with you. And I always make this point to people that one of the big issues with councils is they have to enact the law. So they don't get to make it, and you might not like it, but that means you've actually got to follow it. And the number of times I've had conversations with people where they said, yeah, but I don't like it. I'm like, good for you. You got yourself elected, you stood up, you said you were going to do this, now do it. And this is one of those worst areas possible, because we've got thousands of people around the country, probably millions at this point, who are fighting for what is a basic right to have an education. And for a lot of young people, they are now going to be going into their adult lives without the skills they need because somebody sat there and said, that was £8,000, you can't do that. Or those parents are a bit middle class, they just know the law. Actually said to me, these parents are middle class and they know the law. So they're just trying to get stuff. They know the law and they're trying to abuse the law because they know it. And I found myself going, well, hang on a second, like I did not know the law actually until I had actually kind of dug deeper. Actually, it is the law. Like, what does this even mean? And trying to square that circle when you're an elected member and you hear these things, what are we meant to do when you've got an institution where people say the words, oh, well, yeah, we could do that. We haven't got the money, so we're not going to. So what we're going to do is we're just going to kick it down the road because we need to find a solution that we can both live with. Well, that doesn't work because the law said you had to do this. The tribunal has said do it. So it gets incredibly frustrating when we find ourselves actually being told, not just by officers, but also fellow elected members, that actually we don't want to do it. We're not going to do it. And I have to say, that's the one thing that is an absolute kick-out, and probably one of the reasons why I found myself crying in a couple of times. Because you are so frustrated by the fact that people are not listening, and that they are enacting actual habits that shouldn't be there, and you know there is a young person on the other side of it, that they are not getting the education they need. So I would say the openness and honesty is the bit that really needs to be there. And I think if parents actually started hearing social workers saying, look, we've got to try and find a way to do this, and I'm not quite sure how we're going to get there, let's go on a journey together, let's actually get some buy-in and let's try and find a way forward, I think you would actually find parents saying, okay, let's give this a go. And instead what you get is barriers, people not picking up emails, people not listening to your phone calls, people not calling you back. And then people like myself frantically trying to pick up probably thousands of cases we probably would love to try and deal with. But there's 57 elected members in Worcestershire, and I know full well that many of them are not listening to their own residents. So yeah. Sorry to just like throw a huge amount of fire onto the problem here, but yeah, we all need to listen more, and we actually need to engage better, and we need to try and find solutions. It's not just about the money. Sometimes it's got to be about finding what we can do, even if it is a starting point.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that need for open, honest, transparent communication is so key. And interesting that this covenant talks about trusted independent partners. And I think there's no sense of partnership at the moment. There's no sense of a relationship at all. And that trust comes from open, honest communication, doesn't it? That's how you build trust, by people doing what they say they'll do, by ringing you back when they say they'll ring you back, and just doing the really basic things. And I think so often the whole way that we work in local authorities, and we are public servants, if we're working in local authorities, we are public servants in service of people, and that gets forgotten so often, I think.
Exactly what you've just been talking about. Quite a lot of people contact me in Herefordshire, and I say to people, copy me into anything you say, okay? And if I want to be heard in Herefordshire Council, I'll copy in the leader of the council, the chief executive of the council, even for something that perhaps doesn't warrant that. But I know very quickly I will get an answer back from whichever officer, because it rolls back downhill to me. So my suggestion is to all of you, if you're emailing Herefordshire Council, copy your local councillor, copy me in, I don't mind. And make sure that when they see those names appear on it, give them, I better answer this. So that's the solution to what you've just been talking about, is copy people in.
Okay, thank you very much, Jennie. Just what to say, we're up against time a bit, so we're just going to...
I was just going to say, I think we focus so much on doing things right, so following policy, following procedure, rather than doing the right thing. And I think doing the right thing actually costs less usually, because doing things right, following procedures, you get tangled up in appeals and tribunals and all of that, and that it just makes everything worse in terms of blame or escalate. So if we just kind of do the right thing more, do the human thing, and I think that will make a massive difference.
Right. No, I think we're overrunning time, and time waits for no person.
Couple of questions from the floor, and then we'll go on to our next one.
Hold on. So we just looking. Talk amongst yourselves. This is the.
We'll not morph into the plenary.
This will morph into the plenary. So, could we take some questions then?
Yeah. Or
please.
solutions. Anybody that hasn't spoken.
Anyone that's not spoken as yet? Yeah. Gentleman at the back.
Right.
Hello to everybody. I'm here very much as a guest, and I'm delighted to be here. And I think it's an absolutely incredible event, because although over the years I have attended other events where parents are trying to get together and speak out with others about what's happening, there's something, seems to me, unique about this gathering. You've got such a varied group of people, because you've got parents, you've got authors, people who've taken the trouble to try and get it down in writing, and you've also got counsellors, etc. So, fantastic event, and I was very pleased to be invited. I just want to put in a couple of my thoughts. I have never been through the system. I've never had any problem with social services or any interaction. But 20 years ago, or nearly 20 years ago, a lady came to see me, and she said that her young daughter, 10 years old, had been sick. She couldn't get a diagnosis from the GP. She couldn't get a diagnosis from hospital consultants. And eventually she was being accused of Munchausen by proxy, which has already been mentioned today. She took her daughter to Florida to get a diagnosis. She was lawfully entitled to do that. There was no family court ruling to stop it. And subsequently in Florida, her daughter was diagnosed with Zollinger disease, which is ulceration of the gut. It's very painful. But a social worker arrived with an American police officer, and her daughter was taken from her at gunpoint. She was flown back to the UK on a false passport, and the little girl was put in a psychiatric unit where she was told her pain was imaginary. Even when the local authority finally accepted the diagnosis of Zollinger, which the mother had obtained, the daughter was never given back. That was my first interaction with a parent who had gone through this horrific process. And that lady came to see me with 2 suitcases of court documents. And I spent a week going through those documents and then came to the conclusion that her story was 100% true. Since that day, amongst other things that I've done, I've tried to learn more and also support people that have been through this horrific system. And that has resulted in me ultimately having a small media company where I've put out interviews of people trying to speak out about their experiences. But of course, it's difficult for them to speak out because if they've been near a family court, they are gagged by the family court secrecy rules. However, there is a way around that, and I've been able to demonstrate that very successfully over the last month. What I want to say to you is that there's a problem, and each of you are coming in with part of the problem. It's in a discrete area. Some of it's very personal to you as individuals because it's your personal case, but some of it falls into areas. It might be social services, it could be education, it could be a mix, but there's a problem, and you can't solve a problem unless you can actually identify what the problem is in the first place. And I'm very gently going to suggest there's a little bit more thinking around what the problem is. But if we can think what the problem is, then we can start to think what the solution is. But I'm going to tell you what one of the biggest solutions is, and that is to expose what is happening. And the biggest problem that, if I may say, we all face is that when we try and talk about this subject, everything closes down. The bigger media companies may put out something, but they don't follow it up. They don't do the proper documentaries. We've heard about local councils using reputation management to shut down the story locally. We've heard about them not wanting parents to speak out. This is cover-up. And that's a very powerful part of the story. The other thing is to understand the public. Most people in the public are nice people, and actually most of them can't bear to hear these stories because they find them too emotionally distressing. And so what they do is they shut off. So when we try and expose your stories, there's a need to get them out in a very calm, measured way. And that can be a big problem because many of the parents are so full of stress and anxiety and hurt as a result of their case. And therefore, there's a need for teamwork to work with new parents to give them the confidence to speak out in a way where they don't get locked up for breaching family court secrecy rules. We can do this. It's now been proven what we can do, but to make it happen, we all need to work together. If you've ever seen the film Gladiator, Russell Crowe is in the arena. He's surrounded by all the chariots and the people who've come to cut down the victims. And he turns to his fellow men in the arena and he says, stick together. And this is the start point. Exposure, calmness, stick together.
Thank you, Bryony. I'm just going to remind you that when we finish here, we can continue the conversation at the left bank in the VIP lounge. We need to move on to our next speaker, but should we just take Joni? Just one quick question.
There has never been a public inquiry into children's social care in England. Do you think there should be a statutory public inquiry into Herefordshire Children's Services so lessons can be learned that can be applied locally and obviously across England?
Well, why don't we take a vote in the room? Why don't we take a vote in the room? Because what I say is just one thing, isn't it? So let's take a vote in the room. Who thinks that there should be a public inquiry? Andy Worcester too. Okay, and I'd quite like to hear from anybody who thinks that a public inquiry might not be helpful. Is there anybody in the room who thinks that?
Yeah, I'd like to say, I mean, look where they're going with things at the moment, with Rotherham and all that sort of stuff. They're not doing it well. Until they can do it well, I don't think there's any point doing it. So let's see what happens with the Rotherham thing before we start kicking off with anything else. Because if they do that well, you can hang the shirt tails of that and say, actually, yeah, let's do this about that. Because at the minute, the government has proven time and time again, they start an inquiry, and it goes nowhere, and they don't listen to what comes out at the end anyway. So I understand why you asked for it, absolutely, but I don't think the mechanism is there to get a decent result at this time.
I think this is a conversation we can have at another stage, but we've heard today over and over again complete lack of accountability. We've got a council here, and it looks like we've got one in Worcester, which is totally, in my opinion, unaccountable. It will be hostile to anybody that comes into conflict with it. Public inquiries, as you say, Jim, their record is very shady. But once you have a public inquiry, things change on the ground. Things have changed in Rotherham very drastically. The public inquiry, yes, it takes a long time, but there is no other show in town. And if you've got no alternatives, then you'll choose the least worst. And I think that the injustices that have been done to families in Hereford, the historic injustices, the families that are living with those traumas, which are still unrecognised, which are still unremedied. We must do whatever we can, and it may be a blunt instrument, but it's something that we should call for. I think, unfortunately, I know there's some raised hands, but we're going to have to move on. Yeah, thank you very much. Sorry.
1 minute break while we swap.
The first thing that I was going to say is, sorry, my name is Sarah. I'm the Dean of Hereford. I have no real experience of what you have experience of. I've been very acutely aware of that as I've been sitting listening to proceedings in the half of the morning that I've been here for. But I do possibly have something to say that might be useful as the head of an institution that has fallen really, really foul in terms of being failing in something really important. And you'll notice what that institution is. I don't know what you think about that institution. I don't know what you think about the faith world. In a sense, it doesn't matter, because I'm here really to just try and contribute in some way from the point of view of what might you find useful to know when dealing with institutions that are failing and have failed. So that's the perspective that I'm trying to come from. All the things that I've heard already this morning about being a human being, about actually listening, about giving voice to the people who typically don't have a voice because it's tricky, resonate really strongly with me as a senior church leader. So I'm representing right now a faceless institution in one sense that has done serious harm to people. I want to acknowledge that right now. And I acknowledge that I'm talking into a room that is full of pain and considerable experience of being on the end of a very different sort of institution, but nonetheless a body that has done harm. And I suspect that even though you have lives to lead and battles to fight, it will not have escaped your notice that over the last couple of decades or so, the institution that I serve has very, very publicly been shown not only to have harboured some horrific abusers of children and adults, but also to have apparently covered up and mishandled some of this abuse in a variety of ways that's left survivors or those trying to speak into it even more broken and even more devastated. So I recognise what institutions can do and what mine in particular has done. The Make-In report last year into the church's handling of a prolific abuser, John Smith, resulted directly, you will remember, in the resignation and trial by media of the most senior cleric in the Church of England and the global leader of the Anglican Communion, the Archbishop of Canterbury, and I'm sure you will remember that. And I have to say, here's where some of the nuance comes in, because this was a leader who had spent over a decade putting processes and structures and measures in place to try to reduce risk, to try to take away the opportunity for people to harm others, and also trying to help the church take responsibility for what it had done over those years. And I think the lessons that we might learn from that might be useful to you when you're dealing with other institutions. That's my only real reason for standing here today. When safeguarding of any kind is in the mix, when children are in the mix, I say this neutrally, nobody wins unless we get a solution. Nobody wins. Institutional failure, however, changes institutional response. And that changes the people who work for institutions. And I think that is something that's worth holding. When a leader is taken down for the failings of his institution, and especially in the case of the church, when the institution is supposed to be a force for good, a force that speaks of love and charity and all of those things, which believes in redemption through acknowledgement of wrongdoing and transformation through repentance, when it exists to try and build a new society, then the fall is enormous. And the psychological impact of very public evidence of failure in all those things is a really hard thing to live with. It cannot be overestimated. The church today, I'm not holding it up as a great model of anything, that would be very foolish, but the church today is unrecognisable from a safeguarding point of view from how it was even when I became a priest in 2007. As each horrible revelation or inquiry has come to light, several things have happened, and I want you, the first one's a bit dire, but after that I want you to take some hope from some of the things that have happened. The first thing that has happened, and I think we see it in the context that you're all fighting at the moment, is that determined efforts have been made to never let it happen again. That is what the church has really been trying to do for a very long time. And every inquiry, therefore, adds more rules to the book, more pressure on staff to comply with procedure. Office holders and volunteers are put under increasing pressure. We've talked about fear. Fear is in there is no doubt about it. A combination of reforms and initiatives has led to a heavily bureaucratized system and a sense of fear of letting things go wrong again. And the fear is mainly in the church's context, a fear of letting down vulnerable people who we're supposed to be looking after. But it's also a fear, and you need to know this, of not being seen to be correct, of being negligent, of PR, and yes, of costing the institution a lot of money. All of those things are in play and have been in play in my institution and will be in play in other institutions too. Leaders have to tussle with the question, not just leaders, perhaps people working within the middle of organisations like this have to tussle with the question of, do I let the organisation die for the sake of one, or do I fight for the one for the sake, do I fight the one rather for the sake, and ignore the one for the sake of the many who actually do benefit from its existence? That's the kind of tussle that's going on in these organisations. And the cumulative effect of all of that is to create a work environment that is full of obstacles to the core work of the institution, which means that it does less of the good stuff that it did before, because it's so busy being frightened of getting that wrong. And the balance between doing good and the impact of a bad actor slides into extreme caution, and the good gets diminished. The second thing, which I think is more hopeful for you, that's tricky when you're encountering people working within the institution. The second thing is that from the church's point of view, because the church is relatively self-aware and self-critical, you might not believe that, but it actually is. What happens is that some important attitudinal changes are happening that will eventually make it a better institution. It's painful, it's slow, and it's horrible for everybody, but it's called humility. And every time someone calls us out, every time we are not listening to somebody, every time we are caught trying to protect our own backsides for one reason or another, every time we acknowledge where we've got it wrong, we will start to become a better and stronger institution. Every institution that has failure to its name needs to learn to respond with humility. And that, I think, is a real key thing. From a church point of view, the following on from humility is repentance. The willingness to acknowledge what we've done, in our case, before the highest power, not just other people, but certainly other people, and to try and put things right, even though that might be really costly in terms of finance and reputation. Repentance is a really tricky thing, because often the people trying to deal with the problem are not the people who caused it. That's certainly true of 30-year-old safeguarding issues. The people clearing up institutional failure are not generally the abuser in the church's case, but they may deal with things wrongly, they may deal with things insensitively, and they may be taken down for it, almost as if they were the abuser. So for every employee of the church or any other institution who does something awful, there are hundreds, thousands who are really good people trying to do and achieving really good things. And it's really hard to get the balance, isn't it? For every vile offence, in our case, committed 30 years ago, there's a team of people, some of whom were not even born at the time of the offence, trying to deal with the pain and the rage directed at them by wounded people, but who were not and are not the problem. And I think that is a piece of information that you need to hold as you take your justice issues forward, that it's not that straightforward for the people in the institutions either. And I think understanding that will enable dialogue in a very constructive way. I am in no doubt that the institutional response should be one of repentance and in some cases actual redress, but the humiliation of corporate bodies makes more vulnerable defensive people out of people who just happen to work for an institution. And I think just the human factor in there is important. The fact is that many of those staff are not to blame for what they are doing. They are colluding and collaborating, but they're probably not the cause. Where the institution is negligent or covering its backside, and where injustice is being perpetrated, yes, that needs calling out. I mean, no doubt about that. But it doesn't deserve to be the object of revenge, but the object of justice. The way you campaigners, in our case survivors of safeguarding abuses, deal with the people who are trying to be helpful sometimes doesn't help. I don't know what the answer is to that, but I just want you to hear that. An institutional response to institutional failure obviously is to look after and hear the person who has suffered the injustice, of course, but it also is going to be trying to look after its staff who are on the front line of a lot of hatred and a lot of pain. And I think part of the solution is how we can understand that as we go forward. This is about human beings in the whole picture, not simply those who've suffered the injustice, which indeed is true, but also the people that you're trying to deal with also are human. Institutional response to failure that causes failure of humanity on any front is not the right solution and is not the right response. Violence begets violence begets violence. And that's a challenge both to institutions who must not perpetrate further violence on people's lives and those who seek to challenge. There are evil people. There are people who don't care, who are vested in their interests. But most are not. And how we deal with each other is the measure of who we are. And the challenge for a community of people who have who have suffered at the hands of institutions, who have met injustice, is yes, to seek solutions, yes, to seek justice, yes, to seek change, yes, to seek solutions. I completely uphold all of you doing what you're doing here today. But to do so without seeking revenge is absolutely must be at the heart of the solution. Because when push comes to shove, it's human being and human being and human being. Thank you.
Right, that's the end of proceedings. I'd just like to say thank you to Sarah and thank you to all of the speakers, thank you to the audience, thank you to the organisers, thank you to Ollie. We're overrun. We have a lounge, a comfy lounge where we can get food and drink or just sit around and chat. Would somebody like to guide people there who don't know it?
There's some maps.
There's some maps. If you're new to Hereford, there are some maps outside. Yeah, there's a lot more to be said, and we can do it in slightly more comfort at our own pace with no agenda for the rest of the afternoon. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming.